Hi, today I'm going to analyze a game called Spelunky. The genre of this game is rock-like platformer, whereby the objective is to reach from one point to another point into a 2D virtual world. And once you play this game, the thing you notice are the extremely challenging difficulty and permanent death. Fundamentally, Spelunky is a game by which the avatar explores the underground caves while collecting treasures, killing enemies, and avoiding traps. So before I start, this is the layout of the main analysis of this paper. 3 learning principles and 1 design flaw. So the first G's learning principle is pleasantly frustrating. Basically, pleasantly frustrating is a level of challenge in the sense that the game is difficult but still within the capabilities of the players. In other words, it is challenging but doable. So the first property every player should realize when playing Spelunky would be the permanent death. This is the idea that every time the player loses the game, they will have to start all over from level 1. Which sounds ridiculous, right? Not only that, you'll also lose all the valuable items you have gained. Well, this seems like it actually violates the pleasantly frustrating principle. Ironically, this unreasonable difficulty is actually what engages gamers to continue playing Spelunky, and many would in fact consider Spelunky to be very addictive, which can be seen in many gaming forums. And personally, I feel that the reason it fits the idea of the pleasantly frustrating is because even though it is extremely difficult, it is actually very reasonable after many hours of practicing. Okay, in today's classroom setting, classrooms are sorted according to students' age. And there are good students who find the test too easy, and also there are not as good students who simply find learning too challenging. And the fundamental reason behind this is that different students have different learning pace. I argue that schools should group students according to their abilities but not their age. With this class system, tests can be standardized and designed in such a way that it challenges each group of students intellectually of different level, but keeping it the difficulties in a reasonable range, which is precisely the definition of pleasantly frustrating. This can avoid the phenomenon whereby the good students who excel in tests do not learn much since the test is too easy for them, thereby hindering their potential to excel even better. As for those who does not learn as fast, the new allocation system help them to learn at their own pace without worrying their abilities relative to their classmates. The second principle is the cycle of expertise, which essentially means practice makes perfect, and also the idea of learning a new task, practicing it until you master at a new task, and repeating the cycle again. For each gameplay, the avatar starts with 4 health points. Additional HP could be obtained by saving the damsels. However, the possibility of losing a HP is significantly higher than the possibility of gaining an extra HP. And this is when practice helps the player to be better at this game and stay longer in the game. Let me show you another example. The arrow trap would shoot arrow at anything that comes within 6 or 7 tiles in front of them. One way player can bypass this is by simply throwing a stone in front of the trap to trick the arrow trap. The reason I mention this is because the game does not actually tell you anything about the way to avoid any trap. The player have to figure out themselves through practice and trial and error. Let me justify why Cycle of Expertise works in this game. A study was conducted to find out what can help to improve MMR, which is a performance score in Dota 2. Not surprisingly, time on task, aka the time spent on a game, is one of the best predictor in predicting performance score. As you can expect, the more time you spend on a game, the better you are. This is why practice is so crucial in Spelunky. The idea of practice makes perfect can also be applied in culinary art. Yes, it is essential for a chef to practice their skills routinely in a particular dish. However, it is actually more important for them to constantly learn new recipes in order to integrate them into the new original dish. Inferably, this is what makes a restaurant and a chef innovative. One chef that has practiced Cycle of Expertise extensively is Gordon Ramsay. He always traveled to other countries to learn new recipes and skills, and ultimately incorporating them into his original dishes. which is what makes him one of the best in the world. The third principle is skills as strategies, which simply means putting practice in context to accomplish any goal. The levels in Spelunky are procedurally generated, which means that the levels are generated by an algorithm rather than random spawns. This means that for each time the player loses the game, the new game will take place in a different virtual world. Again, this may seem paradoxical with the cycle of expertise principle due to the randomness of the game, since the player cannot get repeated practice on the exact same task. However, the purpose of this game is not about rote memorization, but rather learning the general rules and understanding how the overall system works. Players in Spelunky have to read the game for context and adapt to the randomness inherent in the game. For example, the player does not know the number or location of the bat. The only certain characteristic of the bat known to the player is its moving pattern. Therefore, the player can take advantage of this knowledge to kill the bat effectively by responding to its movement on the spot. So in a way, this randomness in Spelunky actually forces the player to think on their feet and forces them to learn from previous mistakes. Thereby, it can greatly lower the chance of them getting hit or killed by enemies or traps. Besides that, the limited supplies also encourage the players to take the risk-reward trade-off into account. Each game starts with only 4 ropes and 4 bombs. These supplies can be obtained throughout the game, but most of the time it requires time and effort. Throughout the game, the player has to make constant decisions knowing this limitation. For instance, some of the time, damsel will be trapped in a confined place where bombs or ropes have to be used in order to save her. However, players often have to weigh in the cost and benefit of using the finite supplies for the additional health point. Thus, players should ask themselves if it is worth a bomb for an additional health. In the general learning settings, I argue that assessment tests should be designed in such a way that it has similar structures and context as the materials learned in class. This is an example of authentic learning, because this kind of assessment has a higher connection with learning. When the assessment test and class materials does not align, students may feel that the materials is useless since they will not be tested anyway. Therefore, one way of making authentic learning works is to structure the test as a learning process itself. With this, students can not only apply the knowledge they have learned in the assessment test, they can also further solidify the materials. In this way, students can see the relevancy of the materials, which makes remembering the materials much more easier. Okay, I argue that the shopkeeper is a design flaw that may demotivate players from playing this game. Essentially, the shopkeeper is an old man who sells supplies and special items throughout the gameplay. What makes the shopkeeper a design flaw is that the keeper is overly powered and would kill mercilessly with the slightest provocation, even if it's not the player's fault. While stealing or attempting to kill the shopkeeper would justify his hostile behavior, it may not be the case sometimes when it is not the player's fault. For example, if a frog explodes after it is killed by a trap, the shopkeeper will blame the avatar and try to kill him. To make matters worse, there will be also an additional shopkeeper near the exit of each level, making it even impossible to escape from the hostile shopkeeper. In order to rectify this overpowered ability of the shopkeeper, the most easiest and direct way is to simply decrease the antagonistic behavior of the shopkeeper. In fact, I argue that the shopkeeper should not be appearing near the exit of every level. This is because managing to escape from a hostile shopkeeper in one level is already a reasonable indication of a player's ability in Spelunky. Having an additional shopkeeper with a killing intent near the exit of each level may be too unfair even to the experienced player. This is the end of my paper. Thank you.